The drive for continuous improvement seems to be encoded into the human DNA. In the span of an average lifetime, innovation has taken us from the Model T to the supercar, from the Wright brothers plane to the space shuttle, from the ENIAC computer to the smartphone. You get the point. Yet some people believe that advancements in technology will lead to the eventual undoing of the human race. And they could be right. Regardless, it's impossible to ignore the impact innovation has had on all of our lives so far. Some successful inventors have endured plenty of failures, because not all new ideas are winners, and some fail spectacularly. But true innovators are undaunted by setbacks, and they learn from their mistakes, trying again and again and again. Soichiro Honda, the co-founder of Honda Motor Company, was one such true innovator. He said, "What can you learn until you try? And when we fail, we learn how not to fail." Sometimes, however, innovation can be overambitious, trying to move too far, too fast with a single product, which can lead to failure. Honda famously did that with their oval piston NR500 Grand Prix race bike, which I cover in my video about the Honda Interceptor. Today I'll tell you the story of an earlier time when too much innovation led to the failure of a Honda product. Post-World War II, Japanese people were in dire need of affordable transportation, and scooters went a long way toward fulfilling that need. Introduced in 1946, the popular Fuji Heavy Industries Rabbit was Japan's first scooter. Its design was said to be based on the Powell scooters used by the US military. Mitsubishi's Silver Pigeon was also released in 1946. The Rabbit and Silver Pigeon were popular sellers. At one point they had a combined 90% market share. The Rabbit was produced until 1968 and the Silver Pigeon until 1963. By the mid-1950s, Honda was well established in Japan as a maker of innovative engines and motorcycles, so they thought they could design a better scooter than Fuji or Mitsubishi. And that led to the release of the Honda Juno K-Type in 1954. The Juno K certainly was innovative. It had a large acrylic resin windscreen with a horizontal roof-like section to keep rain and sun off the rider. It had turn signals integrated into the body and electric start, both of which were claimed by Honda to be first for motorcycles or scooters. A standout innovation was the Juno K's bodywork, made from fiber-reinforced plastic, or FRP. The only other manufacturer in the world using FRP at the time was Chevrolet for their Corvettes, of which they had made about 300 by the time the Juno hit the market. Mr. Honda wanted to use FRP because they expected it would save weight. However, working with FRP presented a series of daunting challenges. There were problems with pinholes and bumps in the plastic surfaces, and it took a surprising amount of effort to develop a paint that would adhere to this new material. Engineers found themselves in uncharted territory, so they had to solve these challenges through months of trial and error. The Juno K had a cantilevered front suspension, incorporated to simplify tire changes. The Juno's single-cylinder, 189cc 4-stroke overhead valve engine made 6.4 horsepower, for a top speed of 70 km per hour. Unlike most scooters, it had a 3-speed manual transmission with a manual clutch, typical of motorcycles of the day. Features of the K-Type would later show up in the Super Cub, such as FRP panels, a chain final drive enclosed in a case, wide seats, and enclosed handlebars. The Juno K-Type was unveiled in January of 1954, available only in metallic green. Kiichiro Kawashima, who retired from Honda as an executive vice president in 1979, recalled that Honda co-founder Takeo Fujisawa was optimistic about the Juno, saying, "This is a revolutionary scooter. It's bound to have huge sales." Fujisawa's market insights typically had uncanny accuracy, but not in this case, because the Juno was a sales flop. It suffered many problems from the outset. The FRP body enclosure didn't allow enough air to reach the engine, leading to frequent overheating. Worse yet, the plastic panels turned out to be heavier than sheet metal, With that, added to the huge windscreen and so many other innovations, the Juno K tipped the scales at 170 kg. This weight was well out of scooter territory. The Silver Pigeon and Rabbit both weighed less than 140 kgs. By comparison, the Juno was underpowered and cumbersome to handle. Another reason the first Juno missed the mark was because it had a manual transmission and clutch. Scooters of the time typically had automatic centrifugal clutches with V-belt drives. This made the Juno less accessible and more challenging to ride than most of its competitors. The cantilevered front suspension was intended to make changing tires easier, but it was more complex and less robust than the simpler telescopic forks that most others were using at the time. Later in 1954, Honda updated the Juno K0 to the KA, which had changes to the bodywork and the engine bored out to 220 cc's to make 9 horsepower. The KB version followed in 1955 with a lower windscreen and further slight changes to the bodywork, mainly to improve cooling airflow to the engine. However, weighing as much as 195 kgs, the KA and KB were even heavier than the first Juno, and they still had most of its other shortcomings. In total, 5,856 Juno Ks, in all variants, were sold by the time the series was discontinued in 1955. Honda's next scooter was the Juno M80, introduced in 1961. It lacked many of the innovations of the K series, but thanks mainly to a stamped steel frame instead of FRP over tubes, it weighed a more manageable 146 kgs. Unlike the rounded lines of the K series, the M80 had a more conventional design, like most other scooters of the day, and similar to Honda's Super Cub, which had been in production since 1958. The M80 had no windscreen, and with the goal of lowering its center of gravity, Honda gave it a 124cc horizontally opposed twin-cylinder 4-stroke overhead valve engine, making 11 horsepower. Another significant improvement in the M series was a continuously variable transmission. Gone were the gears and manual clutch of the K series. The M80's so-called Battellini-type system, like today's hydrostatic transmissions, used a hydraulic pump and hydraulic motor combination to provide continuously variable ratios without the need for gears or a clutch. The M80 was followed in 1962 by the Juno M85, which had its horizontally opposed twin bumped up to 169 cc's to make 12 horsepower. Although more conventional and less risky than the K series, the M80 and 85 did just as poorly in sales. Only 5,880 units in the M series were sold, all in Japan, before the series was discontinued in 1964. Perhaps the biggest challenge faced by the M series was the cost, which was equivalent to almost $7,023 US, well above the competition in the early 1960s, and well above the price of many small scooters today. Innovators often succeed because they're the first to recognize a need to improve something that others think is good enough already. The Juno is an example of how being first can sometimes be too soon, and how combining too many new ideas into one product can lead to failure. But should we see the Juno as a failure? Honda learned valuable lessons from this project that benefited many of their products in the future. Electric start quickly became the norm for Honda scooters and bikes. They've continued to refine the automatic transmission, which has evolved to the popular dual-clutch transmission in many of their current models. The experience gained in making FRP body panels was put to good use in making the Super Cub. The Juno line's horizontally opposed engines and cantilevered suspension surely gave Honda designers knowledge that was later put to use in products such as the Goldwing. But perhaps the most important lesson Honda learned from the Juno was that customers of the time wanted simple, robust, affordable transportation, not expensive gadgetry or extravagant bodywork. That lesson was clearly applied in the design of the Super Cub, which became the best-selling motor vehicle in history. Mistakes, missteps, and miscalculations can sometimes lead to breakthroughs. As Mr. Honda said, creative ingenuity is a wisdom born of suffering. and failure is arguably a key ingredient of successful innovation. In hindsight, some inventions which appeared to be failures in their time ended up being important turning points on a journey towards success. I believe the Juno scooter was one such turning point. Perhaps that's why Mr. Kawashima called it a splendid failure. Thanks for watching.